Welcome to Journey On. I'm DJ Burr, the host and executive producer. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, behavioral addiction specialist, and best-selling author of I Just Wanted Love, Recovery of a Codependent Sex and Love Addict, available on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. This podcast is for male survivors of sexual abuse and assault who want to experience a life worth living beyond a tragic past. I'm a survivor just like you, and I know the complexity of healing from trauma. I also know the joy that comes from the healing process. Hear our stories and share your own. You are not alone. You too can breathe deep and journey on. I encourage you to visit the Journey On website, www.journeynonpod.com. There you will find a link to sign up for my Recovery Journey newsletter, learn about my weekend recovery events for male survivors, and my online recovery coaching services for male survivors. If you have questions, concerns, or comments, or would like to be on the show, email me at journeynonpodcast@gmail.com. Journey On is on social media. Tweet us at JourneyOnPod. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Journey On Podcast. Thank you for joining me for this very first episode of Journey On. Journey On is inspired by my own experience with sexual abuse and assault. Each week, I want to bring to you stories of hope and recovery. This week, in our very first episode, you will hear my own story. The material you hear today may be hard to listen to. I advise discretion and the use of self-care tools as needed. Take what you like and leave the rest. I grew up in Marietta, Georgia. I lived in a home with my mother, her husband at the time, my stepfather, my younger sister, and my younger brother. I was the oldest, and I was responsible for taking care of what seemed like everyone in the house. I used to get my sister and brother ready for school. I would take care of them when they got home from school. I would cook dinner. I would do homework. My mom wasn't home very often because she was often out doing work. She had a full-time job. She had a part-time job. And she was the primary breadwinner in our family. My stepdad, he was an alcoholic. He, in my opinion, didn't do much to take care of the family. He wasn't really a parent. The only time that he tried to discipline us kids was when, we were interfering with something that he wanted to be doing. It wasn't because we had done something bad or said something bad or because we brought home bad grades. It was just because maybe we were in the way. We were interfering with his drinking and hanging out on the front porch with his friends. He and I fought a lot. He would often scream and yell at me, and I would scream and yell at him. It was just not a healthy dynamic. I didn't respect him as a person or as a parent. And that caused a rift between my mother and I. She and I fought too. She didn't like the fact that my stepfather and I fought, and I didn't like the fact that they fought. They fought like cats and dogs, and I would interject when they were fighting. Part of me believes that was because I thought it was my responsibility to take care of her and my siblings. And whenever I would interject, it seemed like my mom would get mad at me because I was interjecting into adult problems. And so she and I would have conflict. And so it didn't feel safe in my house. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel loved in my house. I felt ignored. I felt ashamed. I felt guilt. I felt fear. It was challenging. I would go off to school and come home with good grades and accolades from my teachers. And whenever I would share that with my mom, it was almost like it was expected of me. So there really wasn't any additional praise or support. It was somewhat like an okay, good, move on. It was shitty. I grew up in this neighborhood where there were a lot of low-income families. I would say all of them were low income. But for some reason, it seemed like we were on the top of the food chain because my mom had a good job. She made good money. but we just didn't make enough. And as a kid, not really understanding how you don't make enough, but you're perceived to make more than anyone else. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. But, looking back, I can see that, just because my mom made a couple extra $100 a month doesn't mean that we were living a life of luxury. We did suffer. We did struggle to put food on our table at times. We did struggle with paying rent. We were on food stamps. We got other government assistance. There were occasions when on Christmas we would get donations from churches and other organizations to help give us kids something to look forward to on Christmas Day. And I think my mom did the best that she could. She had an alcoholic husband. They fought, so there was a lot of domestic violence. And I don't think that she recognized at the time how damaging that environment was to us kids. And particularly to me as the oldest. He wasn't my father. He didn't act like a father. I think he was supposed to be a stepfather, but that didn't really work out well for us. I hated him. And there were times when I would admit that I hated my mom. And those were times when she and I would fight, probably the worst. I don't think that was easy for her to hear. And it wasn't very easy for me to say. I grew up expecting to be hurt and not protected. And I think that's what left me vulnerable. It left me vulnerable and left me at the mercy of abusers. I grew up in a household with an abuser, my stepfather, and at times my mother was abusive. And so I didn't respect adults. I didn't trust adults, not even with some of the most important information in my life. I knew I was gay as a young kid, and I didn't have anyone I could tell that to without fear of judgment or harm coming to me. As a gay, black male growing up in the South, it's not safe to talk about that. It's not safe to disclose who you are. I didn't think it was safe to disclose who I was. And so I kept my secrets as best I could. There were times when my mom found out information and I was confronted about that information of me being sexual with my peers in my neighborhood. But when that came out, it was discussed one afternoon and it was swept under the rug. And it wasn't discussed again until I was 16 years old and living with my grandmother. And I told my mom that I was gay, and she probed to ask me, did someone hurt me? And I said, no one had hurt me. How did I know? And I just told her, well, I know. Not really disclosing that I had already had sex. I mean, I don't even remember when I had sex for the first time, because kids having sex in the projects was the norm. So I really didn't have much to tell her other than the fact that I was gay. And unfortunately, I was getting ready to be outed because of some internet porn I had been searching for on my grandfather's computer. Now, as a 15-year-old going on 16-year-old when that happened, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I didn't know I was leaving myself vulnerable to predators. But even if there were predators on the internet, they were kind of at a distance. There was no one at that time who was threatening me in person. There was no one other than my own family, right? I didn't trust my family, didn't feel safe with my family, couldn't trust that they would take care of me. And when I was kind of forced out of the closet because of my internet usage, and I told my mom I was gay, I was living with my grandmother, and she had always taken care of me, even since I was a young kid. and she asked me to leave her home. She asked me to leave. And at the time, I had just finished up my sophomore year of high school, and I was working at Target at the time. And no, I had gotten a job at Target, and then I had gotten another job at Kids R Us. And so I had a job, and I had friends. And when she asked me to leave, that meant that I had to give all of that up. My option was to move in with a great aunt who lived maybe 45 minutes away. So I was devastated. And I didn't feel safe staying with my grandmother after she asked me to leave, so I moved in with my great-grandmother. I love my great-grandmother to death. And she loved me, and she worried about me a lot. And sometimes that worry seemed more like smothering. So she wanted to know my comings and goings, and in great detail, and as a 16-year-old, I was not really inclined to share all of my business, even with my great-grandmother, whom I love very much. So it was in 1999, I had moved over to my great-grandmother's house during the summer, and I was staying there until I was going to move with my great-aunt. And that summer, it was July 4th weekend, I was sitting outside on the sidewalk, and a man whom I'd known my entire life, he came over to chat with me.
What's the person that did this to you? What's his name?
His name is Freddie, Freddie, Evergin, Evergin.
Is Freddie a white guy, black guy?
Black guy.
And last you knew of, he was at 365 4th Street?
Yes.
All right.
My great-grandmother lived at 350 4th Street, which is kind of almost diagonal from where he lives. Her old house, her house that she lived in was torn down.
Okay. All right. So what happened with Freddie?
I'd known him my whole life. He was what I had believed him to be my biological dad's best friend. And so he came over to chat with me, and he told me he knew what was going on in my family. And I said to him, "What do you mean?" Of course I knew that I had been outed and kicked out, but how would he know that? And he just said, "I know what you're going through." And it was probably a few moments later, he leaned into me and said, "Kiss me." And I looked at him in shock, and I was like, "What do you mean, kiss you? I'm not going to kiss you." I thought it was the weirdest thing ever. I thought it was really fucked up. I mean, I was sitting outside of my great-grandparents' house, and he was just across the street from his own house, where his wife and his children sat. Why was this man asking me to kiss him? I declined, and I think I turned inward and tried to process what was happening to me at that moment, and I began to shut down. I didn't really grasp what was happening. This older man, he was 45 at the time, was approaching me inappropriately. And so instead of telling a parent or telling a grandparent or asking for help from an adult, I kind of just turned inward. And I remember going into the house and crying myself to sleep that night because I thought I had done something wrong. What the hell? But that's where my mind was, I had always thought that I had done something wrong when anything would happen, A lot of the times I was told I was doing something wrong growing up in my dysfunctional family. So, of course, when this man approached me and asked me to kiss him, I thought it was me. I had done something bad. And that was a lot. That moment was a lot. It confused me. It scared me. It frustrated me. It surprised me. And it interested me. I was curious. What did this man want with me? But little did I understand at the time, my vulnerability was probably like, fireworks to him. It was exciting and alluring. He's a predator. And he continued to come after me. I continued to see him because I stayed there for the entire summer. And I worked at Town Center Mall. And he worked at Sears at Town Center Mall, as well as for the Cobb Community Transit. So he he was a supervisor for the Cobb Community Transit. So sometimes he would be on a bus, sometimes he would be in the cars going to different routes. But we worked across the street at each other at Town Center Mall, him at Sears and me at Kids R Us. And so I ran into him when I was going to lunch at the mall, and he began communicating with me kind of the same way. And one day he offered to take me home because we lived right across the street from each other. And we pulled into his driveway, and as I tried to get out, he pulled my arm. He says, "I want you to come in." And I said, "I can't go in your house." And he says, "You will, eventually." Even though he had confused me and scared me, frustrated me, I was still curious about him because I was 16 and someone was paying me attention who wasn't my family. And I think he took advantage of that. It took advantage of my curiosity. And I just want to say that just because I was curious doesn't mean what he did was right. I get that now. But as he continued to groom me, meaning, preparing me for what he ultimately wanted was to have sex with me, he chalked up our experience as like a friendship. And I needed a friend. So he would drive me home. We would go to lunch. We went school shopping. We even bought matching t-shirts. It was a little bit ridiculous now that I look back. But when he would drive me to his home, he would pull into his garage, to his little driveway area, which was diagonal from my house. And he asked me to come in. And I was reluctant. I said no the first time. I probably said no the second time. He drove me home again and asked me to come in. And I said no. And when I got out of the car, he came to the passenger side of the car and leaned over up against me and kissed me. And I went into his house. And after that moment, I was his. He brought me into his world. He molested me. He took advantage of a 16-year-old gay kid who was outed from his social community for being gay, outed from his family for being gay, and who was left vulnerable and scared and needed support. And he became that support. He became the person I needed most. And he relished in it. Anytime he wanted me, he had me. He paged me. It didn't matter where he was, he paged me. He was at work. He was with his family. He would come over and walk down the street and ask me to meet him outside, and I would meet him outside. he became my number one priority. He was more important than work. He was more important than my family. He was more important than friends. And, I had the summer to be with this man. I was trapped and didn't even fucking know it. He had created this world where it was just me, him, and some oxygen. That was about it. And of course I didn't get that, right? I felt like I was Romeo and Juliet, like he was gonna come save me and I was gonna run off with him. In fact, I remember asking him, would he ever leave his wife for me? What 16-year-old in their right mind ask a 45-year-old if they're going to leave their wife for them? I can tell you what 16-year-old, one who is being abused, one who is being manipulated, one who is isolated, one who is scared, one who is traumatized. That was me. He took advantage of me and made me his property. He had sex with me whenever he wanted. He manipulated me to believing that he was my end all and be all. And he would threaten to cut things off, knowing that I would cling to him. He was my life support.
During any of this, nothing was forced. It was just consensual between you and he.
Yeah, if I had to say consensual, yes, even though now I look back at it, I don't agree with that term, but yes.
But you were 16?
I was 16.
When it started. Based on the laws that we have to work with in Georgia,
I know.
The age of consent is 16. So if you're consenting to do that with him, there's not a violation of Georgia law.
I should have had help. I think people in my family knew that something was off. I remember my great-grandmother telling me I shouldn't be speaking with him. But I was gone. My mind was gone. It was all about him. And she was threatening to take that away from me. And I fought back. I got deeper and deeper in the hole. I hid. I lied to be with him. He was like a drug. He was. He was probably the first drug. The first drug out of many. This older man made sure that I needed him. And I strongly, strongly believe that he knew exactly what he was doing and had done it before.
Did Freddie do this with any other people that you know of?
I don't know any specific, I don't know any names, but I remember us, we would drive around the neighborhood and he would see other boys my age and tell me how they were attractive and how he wanted them. But I don't know any of who those people were. And a couple years ago, I'm a therapist and an author, and I wrote about my account of what happened. I didn't include his name or anything like that. But a cousin called me and said, "I know who you're talking about." He approached me too, and I was like, "Wow, why didn't you say something?" And I think when someone approaches children, even if they are 16 in the state of Georgia, they declare an age of consent, someone who is older and is a family friend has more power.
Oh, yeah, I'm clear.
Yeah, has more power.
He orchestrated the entire relationship and groomed me so well that for 17 years, I was unable to tell any authority about what he had done to me. That's power. That's power. He had power over my reality. He had control of my reality.
That happened that summer, and it would happen every time I would come back to visit, because I moved to Powder Springs to start my junior year of high school. Because after I got kicked out, I needed a full-time place to stay. So I went to live with my great aunt in Powder Springs. He actually drove out there and saw me in my yard and called me and said, "Oh, I see you're wearing this, that, and the other." I was like, "What? What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I drove by." But he would call all the time. He would page me on my pager, and things settled down because I didn't come back to visit so often. And then I graduated from high school and I moved to Kennesaw to start attending Kennesaw State University. That's where I graduated from. And I had moved into an apartment up there. And one day my grandmothers had called me down here to Marietta to get some supplies for my apartment. And I told them I couldn't carry it all on the bus. So I asked him to take me. At this time I was probably 18. And then he said, "Yeah, I'll take you up there." And then we went up there to my apartment. And at the time I was in a relationship with someone. He took me into my apartment, and then he did force me. He pushed me on my bed and he attacked me. And I didn't know the roommates at the time. I was terrified. And that was the first time that I realized that he was a predator.
He forced himself on me. He told me I wanted it. He held me against my will. I felt powerless. And I'll never forget that moment. In that moment, I felt the weakest I have ever felt. But you probably won't believe this, but I'll tell you anyway. Even when that happened, I thought that was the only thing he had done wrong. The prior 2 years, I didn't think that was bad. I was still in the grips of his reality that he had created for me. That's fucked up. It wasn't until 4 years ago when I got into the rooms of recovery for sexual addiction, where it wasn't until then when I realized that a 45-year-old does not have a relationship with a 16-year-old. And I don't care what the law in Georgia says. I don't care the fact that it says that, at the age of 16, you can consent to having sex with an adult. I do not give a rat's ass about that law. A 45-year-old does not have sex with a 16-year-old, and the 16-year-old is consenting to that. I don't buy it. It's molestation. It's assault. It causes depression, anxiety, trauma, addiction. Those are all the things that happened to me as a result of what happened that summer back in 1999 and the preceding years. That's what happened. But because I have spent the last 4 years working on building my self-esteem up for the first time, recognizing that I am worthy, I have now been able to understand and accept my place as a human being worthy of love and protection. And what I had then was manipulation and abuse. My story can help others. I believe that to be true. And that's why I'm telling you my story today. I want to help others who may find themselves in a similar situation. You don't have to deal with this in isolation. You can ask for help. You can reach out for support. You can go to the authorities. You can sit down with a detective and tell them your side.
But I just want to make sure something's on paper.
Yeah, I can write this up, and if something pops up with him in the future.
A few years ago, I sent his wife a letter.
All right.
I sent her registered mail.
Yeah.
I'm not sure she ever got it because I didn't do the signature verification thing, but I've never heard from her because she had a son that she brought into their marriage and they had a child together, and he's a predator. And I've been in recovery for the last 4 years. My life kind of went downhill after all this happened. I already grew up in a dysfunctional family system, and then for this to happen, it kind of just sent me on a tailspin.
Well, I'm sorry this happened to you.
The average age that someone, reports this is 40 years old.
Mm. Yeah, I know. It's
And I'm turning 34 on Saturday.
I've worked crimes against children the last 8 years, and I've always said that maybe 5% of the kids that get poked on actually ever tell anybody.
Yeah.
We've had the incidents where, we discover hundreds of victims by one suspect, and nobody told them.
Right, and it's so heartbreaking.
When he approached your cousin, how old was your cousin?
I don't know.
Yeah.
My cousin's in his 50s.
Yeah.
I don't know how old he is.
Well, he's older than you.
He's older than me.
So.
And my dad confronted him after I told my dad 4 years ago. I came home and I told my dad what happened, and he called him up on the phone, and he denied it. He said I was lying, and my dad said, why would after all these years my son come tell me a lie? What would be the purpose?
Yeah.
But he told me he never wanted to see him again. When I was, I think I was probably 19, he came to my sister's birthday party down at my dad's house, and I didn't want to be near him. I didn't know he was coming. And I kind of went and stayed in the backyard, and he kept following me the whole time. It was so terrifying. But I didn't believe I could tell anyone.
Yeah.
And it's so hard.
Yeah. Well, you're doing all the right things. You're getting it out now. I'm sure you feel a lot better for doing it. That's the thing that worries me about child victims, is that they don't ever tell.
You can do your part to secure your life. Don't let someone else take away the fact that you are precious just the way you are. I know that I am now. And no one, absolutely no one can take that away from me. Not my parents, not Freddie, not addiction, not drugs, not sex, not alcohol. I will fight for the rest of my life to preserve my right to live a life worth living. And I have to move on, move forward, and create and inspire, because I am worthy. And so are you. Don't give up. Share your story. Ask for help. You are perfectly imperfect, and that is okay. But you do not deserve to be hurt any longer. Thank you for taking the opportunity to listen to my story. This story is a very important story to me. It's my truth. It's a truth that I haven't always been able to tell. When I do the work that I do, a lot of things come up, and mainly because I work with a lot of people who have a lot of trauma. And one of the ways that I help people work through their trauma is to own their truth. And this is what I did here. I made a decision to own my truth and finally go to the cops. Yes, it had been 17 years since the abuse happened, but I thought it was time to tell the truth. It was also important for me to make sure that the police knew this man's name. For 17 years, I had held it back. My family knew his name because I told them a few years ago. But I think the community at large needs to know his name. He's a predator. Maybe he hasn't done it since he did it to me. Maybe he will never ever do it again. But the fact is, I will never know. My obligation is to speak my truth and to live in recovery, and that's what I've done. I've taken the opportunity to be honest, to live honestly, and to help other people live honestly as well. I would like to share with you some behind-the-scenes thoughts, feelings, and reactions I had as I went to the police department and spoke with the detective. I took my partner with me. He went to the police station with me, and we sat in the lobby after I checked in with the front desk, and I asked for the detective. He came up and introduced himself and walked us through a locked area. He had a passcode to get back into, and we went to this other kind of lounge area. He asked my partner to sit out there and wait for me, and then he and I walked to another corridor, and we went into an interrogation room, and it was just like what they show in the movies. There was a glass wall, which I imagine, in certain cases, there's people on the other side of that. There were recording devices, and there were 2 to 3 chairs, and there was a round table, and my heart was racing. I tried to make light by saying, to the detective that it seemed like just like the shows that I watched, like First 48 or Forensic Files. And, I took a seat, and he sat across from me, and he pulled out his notepad and started writing as I talked with him. And it was interesting as I sat there and told him my truth, because in a sense, it felt like maybe being in an interrogation room was the wrong place for me to be able to state my truth. I had always had this sense that interrogation rooms were for people who had done wrong, and I hadn't done anything wrong. But I assumed that the interrogation room was the only place that you would take a witness to report a crime. I did feel protected there. The door was shut. No one interrupted us. And I had the full attention of the detective. He was a kind guy. I really appreciated him telling me about his work and the work that he had done. And I really appreciated him empathizing with me. It really moved me to hear him say, "I'm sorry that you had to go through this. And I'm sorry that the laws aren't going to do anything at this point to punish this man." And I really appreciate him showing his authenticity by telling me how difficult that work is that he does. Now, you may not have heard all of our conversation through the taped audio that I played for you guys, but he and I had a connection. I really felt connected to this detective and felt like he was a genuine person who wanted to help. And I can imagine him going out into the field helping other people. He had that really southern hospitality that we all have from the South. And I could see how that could help victims of these heinous crimes speak their truth. Sometimes all we need is someone who is willing to show up and listen. And that's what I got working with the detective on when I went to file my police report. Some of you may ask why I did this now. Well, the honest truth is I had an opportunity. I went back to Georgia to visit my family for my birthday, and I had finally come to accept that this was my truth and I needed to tell it. And having the support that I have helped me do it. Knowing that Once I returned to Seattle, I could turn to my friends in recovery. I could go to meetings. I could work with my sponsor. I could work with my therapist to process anything that would have come up. That's what gave me the strength to go in there to do it, knowing that I had the support system. I strongly encourage you to have a valid support system. And when I say valid, I mean people who will listen, people you can trust, people who will not judge, people who will, empathize with you, people who will validate your feelings, people who will show up when they say they're going to show up, people who care, people who love you. Sometimes all we need is someone to listen, someone we love, someone we trust to tell us that they understand. And I hope that each and every one of you has either had that experience or will have that experience when you decide to speak your truth. Now, your truth doesn't have to sound like mine, doesn't have to look like mine. You don't have to go to the police to report this crime that has happened to you. You could write about it. You could journal about it. You could tweet about it. You could write a book about it like I did. You could share about it in a meeting. Your truth can be told any way that you would like. Just make sure that it's a helpful way. It won't cause you harm, and you won't feel regret afterward. In preparation for this podcast, I was asked, what about the possibility of retaliation? And that's a valid question. The fact is, I'm not concerned that he's going to retaliate against me. The truth is, if he were to retaliate against me, he would have to answer some really difficult questions. There are dates and times that I know, names of people he interacted with, places we had gone. I would be able to expose all of those things in greater detail if he were to come after me. I don't think he's going to come after me because I think he's also probably quite damaged himself. I'm not sure of this, but I imagine that someone who abuses children was probably also abused. And as a person in recovery, I wish that he gets the help that he needs. I understand the importance of getting help when you need it. And this is a sick person who needs that help, but it's not my responsibility to get it to him. He has to seek it out, and maybe he has. My hope is that I never have to see him, hear from him, or look at him in any capacity ever again. It's almost a blessing and a curse that the authorities won't be able to charge him for the crime that he committed, and the fact that they don't even consider it a crime. I don't have to see him again, but I do have to live with the memories. And by telling you my story today, I am letting the pain go. Every time I speak my truth, the pain lessens. I don't have to hold on to this anymore. It's no longer a secret. It's all out there for the world. I can continue my life one day at a time. That's why I'm speaking to you, because I want to help you be able to do the same. I want to be able to inspire you to speak your truth and live a life worth living. You don't have to suffer. Suffering is optional. That's one thing that I heard in recovery that has forever stuck with me. I was told that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. I can move on. I can journey on. And that's why I'm naming my podcast, Journey On. Let me help you journey on too.
Journey On is looking to hear from you. If you're interested in sharing your experience, strength, and hope with our audience, email us at journeynonpodcast@gmail.com for details. Journey On's production is currently funded in whole by me as part of my desire to provide support to those who are still suffering. Production costs fluctuate and can be prohibitive in terms of what I can offer to our audience. You can help support Journey On's mission by supporting the production. There are two options. You can donate the amount of your choice directly from your cell phone by texting the word JOURNEY to 855-735-2437. That's JOURNEY to 855-735-2437. Or you can become a patron of the show by setting up a monthly contribution by going to patreon.com/journeyon. That's patreon.com/JOURNEYON. Once there, you can select the contribution level of your choice. Thank you for considering. Don't forget to visit journeynpod.com and sign up for my Recovery Journey newsletter. Once you have subscribed, you will get more information about my weekend male survivor retreats and my online coaching services for male survivors. Journey On is produced by DJ Burr and the Recovery Legacy Network, bringing you recovery on all fronts. Learn more at recoverylegacynetwork.com. Today's music features tracks by CDK and Airtone. You can learn more about the tracks on our website, journeynpod.com. Until next time, breathe deep and journey on.